I kind of like to just like go about my life. And when I meet someone and I feel connected to them, even if it's a stranger in an instant, then I'll ask them to make big talk with me. Like, it's not just kind of like going like all at once. Like, it's like, as I live my life, I think that's kind of what big talk's about, is like making everyday interactions more meaningful.
Kalina, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much for making the time. I cannot wait to share your story, your so inspiring story with my audience. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's a blessing to just kind of have randomly met you recently and instantly feel that connection. Yeah.
So we met at my buddy Chris, our mutual friend, Chris Pan's place. Chris has actually been on the podcast a couple of times. He came on and talked about the origin story of VOMO, which is the voice and movement that he's starting. And at VOMO, which is basically a really cool sing-along experience, right? It's like if karaoke and meditation had a love child, it would be
That's a good way of describing it. Yeah.
And so we went around, we introduced ourselves, and you introduced yourself as the founder of this movement called Big Talk, which immediately got my attention for a couple of reasons. Number one is because it reminded me of those cards that Chris Pan used to give out for his My Intent events. And we gave some out at some of the mutual events that we did together. I was like, oh, that's what that is. But then also just the idea of Big Talk just was really intriguing. And I wanted to know everything. I don't want to freak you out by like bombarding you with questions, but I wanted to know everything about how that started, because when someone looks at you from, just casually, you look like a young woman, probably just out of college or something like that. It's like, how did she start this whole thing? So that's what I want to get into. But I always like to start the conversations talking about childhood. So let's just spend a moment. You grew up in Santa Monica?
Yes, I grew up right here where I am now in Santa Monica, California.
So talk about, what did they call you when you were like, a kid, like you were 4 or 5 years old? Were you Callie or Cal?
KK.
Kalina.
KK.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take it back to the KK days.
Sure.
What was your favorite toy or activity?
Drawing and singing and dancing. That's 3.
Okay, that's cool. So talk about what you got from those artistic forms. What did it do how did it nourish your soul, drawing, singing, and dancing?
I was always very creative and expressive, and lucky to have been raised with parents who valued giving children a self-esteem. So when I was a little kid, I liked doing theater, and I was always drawing like random weird things that I thought of, and posting. When the internet first became a thing, I remember I posted onto this site called like Deviant Art or something, which is kind of like a culty art site. And I would like love staying up late and looking at art and posting my art and talking about art. And then theater as well. I think when I got to middle school, I became more self-conscious and less into like theater and dancing and things like that. But when I was a kid, I loved being able to like project my voice and my expression and feeling. So that was a big part of my upbringing, was being very free and creative and vocal.
Were you good? Did you win awards? Did people give you recognition for those expressions?
I actually did win. Like, I won the yearbook cover contest in 5th grade. So I designed and drew the yearbook cover, and I got like the lead in this musical in 5th grade. And I remember after like people coming up to me, including like the daughters, a girl who went to camp with me, her parents were like famous fashion designers, like I think it was like Guess or something like that. And they were like, oh, you should like come model for us or do something like that. But I mean, my parents always valued academia more than like stuff like theater and acting, even though we're in LA. So I didn't really pursue anything like that when I was a kid.
So I have a weird question about this. When you did get recognized as being good at whatever you were doing, did you feel surprised, or did you kind of know in the back of your mind, yeah, I kind of am good? So,
I think whatever I do, I think I know when I'm good and when I'm not. Like I know when I hit it, you can feel it based off of the effort and the feeling you put into something, when it's good, like intrinsically. So I did feel, I remember like at that stage, I think when I was like 10, I was like, oh, I've hit it. Like I've hit my peak. I've peaked at 10 years old. I'm good. And then everything kind of like fell down later on, when you're like going through puberty and reinventing yourself. And then I remember at that time, I didn't feel like I was good.
So you said your parents, they reinforced education. What were some of the philosophies or ideologies that you remember your parents echoing around your house when you were coming up? Anything stand out? Like you got to work hard to be successful, or,
Totally. I mean, so both my parents are doctors and my grandparents are doctors. And right now my little sister's in medical school. And I think my great grandparents were doctors and engineers. So, working hard and pursuing education was always a philosophical ideology preached in my household. But my mom always said if she wasn't a doctor, she would have wanted to be a writer. And my dad also said like he would have wanted to be a playwright or something. So I feel like I got those parts from them. And I've always been really into activities and trying everything. And I think I was able to try a lot of things when I was younger. And I remember like on summer break, my mom would have like a list for me of things I should check off that day. And I still do that now. I like have so many lists all around me, like all the time of things each day to do. So I've kind of always been raised with like the seize the day, seize the opportunity kind of mindset. But also the very much like go, 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 do as much as you can.
What did you want to be when you grew up? This is when you're like a young teenager, like you're looking at your parents as doctors. They're saying secretly, I want to be a writer. Well, how did that impress upon you and your career aspirations?
So I had like a list that I called the 5 A's, and it was like author, actress, architect, animal biologist, and anchor woman, like someone on the news.
Wow.
And so that's what I would tell people when I like couldn't choose one thing. And sometimes I like to think now like Big Talk has afforded me the ability to do like an essence of all those different things.
Okay. Anchor woman. That's interesting. And why Northwestern out of all the colleges in the world? Why did you choose that one?
Yeah. So Northwestern has one of the best journalism schools in the world. So I got into their journalism program. So it was just kind of like
Anchor woman.
Yeah. Anchor woman. That's the one I chose for that.
Anchor woman was in the lead. Okay. Okay. Good. So, all right. So take us to sophomore year. You described, and I listened to a few of your other interviews, and you described how you had been feeling, you knew a lot of people, but you didn't really feel like you were deeply connected to anyone. And I guess before you talk about that, or I don't know, which came first, Ecuador and Germany, or this epiphany that I don't feel very
Epiphany came first. Yeah.
Okay. So how did that happen? Why did it happen? Where were you? What was going on around you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I took for granted that I was raised in Santa Monica and was with the same, I didn't move around as a kid. So I was with the same people and had really deep friendships and connections up until I left for college. And that was my first time moving to a new place by myself. And I think like the culture of the Midwest feels more foreign to me than living in another country. And when I moved there,
I told you that.
Huh? Yeah. When I moved there, I felt really confused, disconnected, lonely. Even though other people didn't see it that way. Like I was going to a lot of parties. I made a lot of friends. I joined sorority. I started a club. And like I would meet a lot of people and have all these kind of service level connections, but still feel this like deep existential feeling of loneliness. Like I remember I would just like go back to my dorm room and cry and like just didn't know what to do. And like it was the first time I ever like knew what like therapy even was. And so I remember I called the school therapist and I was like so ashamed. And they're like, oh, you're just having an adjustment disorder. And like regardless if it was an adjustment disorder or not, like I just knew something was not right. And that like I craved something more fulfilling and like that made more sense to me. And I was studying journalism at the time. So the following summer, I had the ability to go to Germany to do a documentary about the Holocaust. and Ecuador to do one about education reform. And because we only had a few weeks in each place, we had to like meet new people right away and get into the deep stuff right away. Because like when you're filming a documentary and interviewing people, like as we are now, you go way more in depth than you would in just a normal everyday conversation. And I saw the power of that. And when I came back home to Los Angeles, I thought, wow, I really want those deeper connections in my everyday life. Like I don't want it just to be a travel magical project thing. Yes.
You saw something in Germany and the Berlin Wall. I don't want you to leave that out of the story.
Oh,
because that kind of inspired.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two things I'll say. So before I left for Germany, I was having a deep conversation with a friend. And I said, wow, these are the conversations I've been missing this past year in school. And he said, yeah, screw small talk. And that was how I got the name idea for Big Talk. I didn't really know what to do with it at the time. It just kind of like, ding, a light bulb and I just kind of laid it aside in my brain. And then on my last day in Germany, I saw a question written on the Berlin Wall. And it said, what do you want to do before you die? And something just like clicked. And I was like, that's Big Talk. That question like is the heart of what really matters in life, what people care about. And so when I came back home, I decided to try out an experiment where I walked up to strangers and skipped the small talk to ask them, what do you want to do before you die?
Okay, so I have a few follow-up questions about this experiment. So your friend who you're having a conversation with, who said screw small talk, did you verbalize big talk to yourself in that moment? Did you like say, hey, that'd be a great idea for a game, or a way to engage with people, or how clear was it in your awareness at that time?
I knew the name had power, but I had no idea what it would do and where it could lead. It was just a name.
Did you go home and Google and buy the domain name or anything like that?
No, nothing like that. It was just in my head. The following summer, actually, after like the thing happened in Germany, I had this blue notebook that I think is still here, where I started writing down Big Talk and what it could be and ideas for what it could evolve into. And there's like this whole chart where I put like all these different manifestations of what Big Talk could be.
So it was incubating for about a year then.
Yeah.
And had you told anyone about it, or it was just literally renting space in your head? And as it was, you would have these little experiences, and then it would, you would say to yourself, oh, that'd be an interesting idea for Big Talk. And then seeing the Berlin Wall question, like this question is not, I mean, it's definitely an esoteric question, but I wouldn't say it's a question we haven't heard before. So what was it about that question that really spoke to you? I'm curious.
So it was the summer before my junior year of college. And junior year is when everyone's like, this is what I'm going to do with my professional life. And everyone like applies to be a consultant or whatever. And I knew from the bottom of my heart that I like wanted to do something different and original. And I think that question hit me because it's like, oh shoot, I got to do it now. Like, otherwise I'm going to be like pulled into this rat race of all the college kids trying to like find like a typical job after school. And so I did it before junior year. And sure enough, it changed everything. Like I left school halfway through junior year. And I think that question spoke to me at that point in my life when it was like, it's kind of like now or never, like this is the time. And I've noticed in general, like Big Talk speaks to people the most during times of transition in their lives or when they're contemplating some big life change. Like I'll have people who learn about Big Talk and it doesn't mean anything to them. And then a few years later, they reach out to me and tell me about how like they used it in their life in whatever way. And like, it finally hit them.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't exactly leave school because you wanted to leave school. You were basically kicked out of this study abroad program. Yeah. So talk about that experience. And I guess that was the beginning of your crisis moment, right?
Oh, yeah.
That kind of led to you leaning in on this Big Talk initiative.
Yeah. So before I started Big Talk, I had gotten into this like prestigious program I had worked all year for to go to South Africa and do a journalism residency there. And then I created Big Talk and I saw the impact it had because I had like hundreds of people from all over the world reaching out to me who saw the video. And like as a college student, that's like insane to like experience that. I mean, now I think it's more normal with social media being such a thing. But back then it was like crazy to start receiving messages from strangers who are telling you, that you've changed their life in some way. And I just felt suddenly this kind of like mission, like I had to fulfill. I remember recording a video to myself on my laptop where I promised myself, I'm like, you're giving this 2 years of your life. And I told myself that. And I mean, now it's been like 5, 7, I don't know. And so I suddenly, like, my whole world was Big Talk. Every interaction I had, everything I did related back to it in kind of an unhealthy way. It was like an obsession way. And like, you hear that now a lot with founders who like go through these kind of obsessive things with their startup or project or whatever. And I was in this class for the residency for South Africa. I was about to go, and we had to do a final project. And I chose to do mine about how art and like community or something like that could help drive social change. And everyone else was doing their projects about like prison systems and racism and really intense kind of like heavy topics. And my professors were like, you aren't ready for this. Like, Johannesburg is not, you know, like a fairy tale place. Like, you're making it seem like in this project, like it's not, you can't just like focus on these happy, creative, artsy, whatever things. And like, it was such like a shock to my system, but I'm so glad it did happen, that I was kicked out of it, because I knew I didn't want to go. Like, I felt like torn in two at that time. I remember like I would like go into professors' offices and they'd be like, are you okay? Like, you don't look right. Like, I was just like off. And it was the winter in Chicago, which gives me seasonal depression. And I was running a club at the time called Mixed. And all my friends were like spending all their nights going out partying. And I just like didn't feel that drive anymore. So I just knew it wasn't the right place for me. And I left and I came back home to Los Angeles. And it was, again, a very lonely time.
One of your professors gave you some sage advice as well about wearing yourself down. What did he say to you?
Yeah. So there was one professor I had as a mentor at that time. So there were a couple, there were two who kicked me out of the South Africa program, but there was also a lot of professors who were like really big advocates for Big Talk, and including a school rabbi and like a research advisor. There were so many people who were like really on the journey with me. And the professor, he said, you have to feed yourself before you try to feed the world. And what was happening was I was trying to feed the world, but I was not feeding myself as, you know, a 20-year-old college student.
Okay, so let's talk nuts and bolts for a second. You're in this broadcast journalism program, so you have access to cameras, or you just use your phone, or take us to that first day you decided to go out and go up to people. How did you decide who to go up to? What was their opening line, and what happened from there?
I brought my like little DSLR camera that I had and a microphone and a tripod, and I just carried it around, and a notebook to get people to sign it. By
yourself? You were just by yourself?
Yeah, a lot of people think like someone filmed it for me, or like, you know, there's like people. It was just me just carrying all this equipment and walking around the streets, kind of feeling like a crazy weirdo. Like, I was like, this is so abnormal. I mean, this was like before people were like posting stuff all the time on like TikTok and Instagram and streaming everything. This is like before it was normal to just walk around with a video camera. And
this is up in Evanston, downtown Evanston somewhere, or did you go like to the Loop and do this?
So the first video was actually right in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And then I think the second or third one, I was back at school, but I was just walking around like the boardwalk, going to parks, like public spaces in general. And I would choose people to talk to who weren't like busy, like they weren't like rushing off somewhere. They were usually like sitting on a bench or something. And you can just tell when someone has an energy that's going to be more open and willing to talk with you. And there's certain people you kind of take a gamble on when you approach them, but you can just tell when someone has a story. I don't know, you can feel it when you walk past someone who really has everyone has a story, but who really has a story to tell, or like some sort of kind of unfinished business in their heart. You can feel it.
What did you say? You went up to the person on the bench and then what? How'd you open them?
I said, hi, I'm doing a project for college. I said for college, not entirely true, where I am interviewing people for a short time and asking them questions about life. Would you be willing to participate? And half the time they'd say no, and half the time they'd say yes. Or they'd be like, how long is it going to take? And sometimes the conversations lasted a few moments, and other times they lasted 10, 20 minutes. A Big Talk conversation can lead to so much more.
Do you remember any of those initial conversations that did go to a very deep place that kind of moved you?
Yeah. I mean, I remember them mainly because they're in the video, and it's almost like these people are like, they're almost like my spiritual advisors, but they're just everyday people I've met. They say something, and then when I watch it back, I capture that one like truly human moment that really sticks out to me, and that's the one I put in the video, and I keep it in my mind. Like, they've guided the way I live my life. From like the businessman in Beverly Hills who was like, I only have 5 minutes, like wrap it up. And then he's the one who broke down crying, and who at the end was just like, you know what, family is all that matters. I wish I worked less. And like had that kind of epiphany on camera. To this other woman who said like if she only had a little amount of time to live, like she would take a road trip to see someone and finally tell them she loves them. And like this elderly woman who like said she didn't come out as being lesbian until she was in her 50s. And she's like, now I just try to make every moment count, like things like that, just like very like simple sound bites about life that like they really stick with me and guide me on how to live life. And those are the people who give me the best advice. Like I love listening to like, you know, celebrity wisdom and whatever, and the ancient greats, but there's stories and wisdom all around us every day. And that's what Big Talk has taught me.
And the question they were answering mainly was, what do you want to do before you die? The same question you saw on the Berlin Wall. Were you making that like, this is the opening question, or was that the
opening question?
Was there a series of questions?
It was, what do you want to do before you die? And then what about if you found out you only had 1 day left to live? And then what matters most in life to you?
So, you know, a part of having a deep conversation with someone that you meet is that you have to share as well. You just can't be the one that's going and excavating all your deepest wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a part of your interview strategy? Did you share anything with them that was a little bit vulnerable?
Yeah, sometimes, not always. Like now, if I have a Big Talk conversation, like at an event or use a card game, like it's a two-way thing. At the time, I think I was more focused on making almost like a little documentary to showcase the point of doing Big Talk instead of small talk. But there were people that after I would have a deeper conversation with, or it would turn into a relationship that went beyond just a video.
So how many of these little clips did you have before you made the video that went viral?
I think I interviewed like 25 people, and then I included 12 of them in the video. So it's like half.
In one day?
No.
A couple of days? No,
it was a few weeks, I think, over the course. Like, I kind of like to just like go about my life. And when I meet someone and I feel connected to them, even if it's a stranger in an instant, then I'll ask them to make Big Talk with me. Like, it's not just kind of like going like all at once. Like, it's like as I live my life. I think that's kind of what Big Talk's about, is like making everyday interactions more meaningful.
So you already knew how to edit and everything. So, because you've been in this program and
it was a pain in the butt though. Editing is hard and like takes a lot of time.
Did you get feedback from other people before you posted it? Or you just kind of, like you said earlier, you knew when it was right, when it was ready to post?
I was like wandering around doing these interviews for like no particular purpose or end game. And it wasn't until I got that interview with the businessman who broke down in tears that I was like, I felt in my heart, I got it. Like, I was like, this is it. I feel it. This is good. This has a real purpose and it's something special. And then I edited it. And I think I showed like maybe my parents, maybe a friend, and then just posted it and like shared it with more people. And then they shared it, and then more people started sharing it. And then a girl who had gone to my school, who worked for the Huffington Post at the time, she like wrote about it. And then overnight it went like viral, and I started getting messages from people all over the world.
How did that feel?
Incredible to have like made a real impact by doing something that was so personal at first, and then realizing other people felt the same way. Because a lot of the stories I received were people who said like, I also went or I'm going through a period of loneliness or depression, or like contemplating something in my life. Like, there's a woman, I remember sitting in like the campus lobby, and a woman emailed me and said like, your video like made me cry and changed the entire way thinking about my life. Like for so long, I've been trying to quit smoking. And for some reason, seeing your video like instantly made me realize that's what I need to do right now in my life. Like things like that, or people saying they were contemplating suicide when they came across the video and it gave them hope. Like just stories like that made me feel so like this was really a powerful, simple idea that I had to keep working on.
Okay, so initially you're thinking in the back of your mind, anchor woman, architect, actress.
Yeah.
And then you have this viral video. So now you have a little bit of a conflict. Do I keep pursuing what I was pursuing, or is there something to this?
Yeah.
So talk about the conversation that was going on in your head and how you made whatever choice you ultimately made.
Yeah. So I was studying broadcast journalism at the time. And like the typical kind of shiny thing to do is be like a newscaster on camera and like interview people. And I quickly learned like I didn't really want to just like tell the news. A lot of times telling news makes people feel bad or whatever. And I wanted to be more involved in storytelling in people's lives and do something that wasn't so like black and white. And I thought, like doing big talk videos, it's still kind of like being an anchor woman or journalist. I'm telling people stories just in a very kind of like a method that I created by myself. So I guess what was the challenge was realizing that I was no longer just like on the track to go be a newscaster. I was like some sort of like journalist entrepreneur thing. And that was scary because then I was like, oh shoot, I'm really on my own path here and I have to figure it out all by myself.
Did you run it by your parents or any of these teachers or?
Oh yeah.
Were people all in, or were they like, you may want to finish school first and then,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I remember. So I had met this other woman who was kind of a mentor to me, who was also an entrepreneur. And she showed me this PowerPoint presentation that she made for her parents to explain to them why she should leave school or why she should go on her own journey and like work on her business idea instead. And so I like decided to make something like that too. And I showed it to my mom and she was like, that's cool, but you still need to finish school. And so because I was on a leave of absence. And so I took like an online UCLA course. And then I did this internship for 3 months at Facebook in Silicon Valley. And then I got my degree and went back and graduated. And everyone was like, I think I've seen a ghost. Like, you're back. So I did graduate. I just didn't go back to campus. And during those like 1.5 years when everyone was like finishing college, I was like giving talks, including the TEDx talk I gave about Big Talk. And I was just like showing up at events by myself and just bringing a deck of Big Talk cards. And I went to USC and I like worked on Big Talk there with the Annenberg Communication School. And I was just like a little powerhouse. And that's when I met Chris too, because I showed up at this event and met him. And I was just kind of like a college age person out in the real world trying to carve a space for Big Talk.
Okay. So again, I want to go back and just fill in some of the gaps. And the reason I'm doing this is because people are out there, they have an idea, they have something that's lighting them up. And I don't want them to think that it's impossible for them to do it or that you have some kind of magical wand that like there's processes behind all of this. So
it wasn't magic. Yeah.
Generally, you're invited to speak. How did you receive that invitation? Yeah,
sure. So I had never given a public talk about Big Talk before. I had made the video and I had gone back home. And then I saw online, there was this thing you could apply to give a talk at called the Teal Summit. And it was like a bunch of college age people who were like entrepreneurial and had started their own thing. And that was a whole new world to me because I didn't have any friends like that. And it was in San Francisco. So I decided to go by myself to San Francisco and stay in a hostel and give this talk. It's things like now that I would not have the courage to do. And I did it then because I had no other choice. I was all alone and I was either going to have to succeed at Big Talk or not. And I went and I gave this talk and it was like the most attended talk at the summit. And the summit was all these like kind of techie people being like, I'm going to make $1 million doing some XYZ tech thing. And I was just like, here's my project called Big Talk. And it's about skipping small talk for you to connect with anyone. And a ton of people showed up and there's tons of positive feedback. And someone came up to me after and she said, hey, I'm organizing this TEDx talk at my school this year. Would you want to come? And it was this like tiny liberal arts school in Missouri called Westminster College. And I like really didn't want to at the time. One, I think there's like fear of doing something like that. And two, it was just like, it seemed so random to me. But I did it, and I flew to Missouri, and there's probably like 100 people in the audience, and I was super nervous. And then now it's been viewed by 6 million people. And I wish I had prepared more for it and like, you know, done everything from just even making my hair smooth or something. Like I didn't know it was going to be seen by so many people. And it's completely changed Big Talk and my life since then. Yeah.
So you mentioned cards. You have these cards that you got printed up. So talk about the process of that. Like how many cards are there? How did you come up with these questions? How did you know which questions to use versus any other kind of questions? And how did you pay for that?
Yeah. So this is the new card game, but this one was just made. Before that, there's this tiny little paper black and white one that I made. And
that's the one I saw initially.
Yeah. And so right before I left college, I walked into this like design thinking research lab and met the professor there and told him that I wanted to scale this idea of Big Talk. And I didn't really know what that meant because I had no tech experience or whatever, or design or research. And so we started, and he believed in me. He saw the passion, I guess, and let me join his like DTR research lab. And so one like kind of lo-fi way of like testing and scaling up Big Talk was creating question cards. And we tested out different questions with people that like people resonated with or didn't. And then I came down to this criteria for what makes a question a Big Talk question. And it's something that's universal. So it means anyone could answer it just because they're a human being. And and that really cancels out a lot of, you know, party dinner conversation. Because sometimes you'll be in a group of people and you just won't feel comfortable because you don't know the subject matter, the expertise they're talking about. So like a Big Talk question would you know, get rid of that risk. And like, it's all about inclusivity of being a human. And they were questions that were open-ended. So they weren't just like yes or no questions. And they weren't about politics or facts or opinions. They were just about our human experiences. So we just like, I had a list of like 200 questions that we narrowed down. And so the very first deck had like 90 in them. And those weren't perfect either. Like when I went to Singapore, we narrowed it down to like 30 or something because we tested them out across different cultures.
And if a question elicited an answer that was a bit flat multiple times, you would probably weed that one out because it wasn't really. Yeah. We would weed out questions that were flat or personal. How much did it cost to create this card deck? Did you sell them? Were you interested in making money off of them? Were you going to list them on Amazon? Like, what was the plan with that?
Yeah. So at first, I wasn't like, I had no intention of selling it. I was just using them as a workshop tool when I would do Big Talk workshops. And the first cards were like index cards that I like hand wrote. And then the second one were index cards that I printed. So the very first edition of the Big Talk card game were note cards where I hand wrote questions on them. And I tested them out at this dinner with 10 strangers I hosted in San Francisco. And I hosted it at the house of this guy who had seen my video and just invited me to come host a dinner with him. It was very much like in the beginning, it was very much just like trusting strangers and doing things with them.
Yeah, you were big time.
Yeah. And then the second edition, I was like, started doing Big Talk workshops. And so when I was like doing this research at USC, this person recommended me a site called Printer Studio where you could do like custom cards. And like, of course, if you're not ordering them in bulk, it gets expensive, but I probably ordered like 20 or something like that and used them. And then I like ordered maybe 100 or something like that. And then when my TEDx talk came out, someone who worked at Amazon wrote to me, emailed me and was like, my boss's boss's boss saw your talk and wants you to get these cards on Amazon. And they like had a guy who talked with me and really helped me and walked me through the whole process of like creating a product and selling it. And I think the first investment I made was like $1,000 of my own money and like buying a bulk order of the cards. And now each time I order 1,000 of them at a time and ship them off to Amazon or my own home. And it's all just been like my own kind of money reinvesting into it. But I'm like really risk averse. So like I have to make sure people want something before I create it and try to even buy it and then sell it. Yeah.
Was that using CreateSpace on Amazon?
I don't even know what it was called at the time.
That's their self-publishing platform that I used them to publish my first book.
Yeah.
But
so it wasn't so it wasn't published through Amazon.
Right. You just use them to actually
get it on
the cards
which anyone
print on demand.
No, it wasn't even printed on demand. I just all they did was really just hold my hand and walk me through the process of becoming a business owner, because I wasn't a business owner up until that point. Yeah. And now there's tons of conversation cards on Amazon, and it's just, I'm just one of many, but at the time it was this novel thing.
So, how are you paying your bills while you were going through all these, going through this process? Did you have a side job? Your parents giving you money?
Oh, I was always working. I would work big talk. So, so after I gave the talk and after I went viral and all that stuff, I still didn't have any money or job. And I applied no, I didn't apply. I was kind of forced to get a job, but I became a secretary for 3 months. And it was literally the opposite of everything I love. It was horrible. I was sitting in a desk in this dark room and not talking to anyone, because no one would walk in there, because it was this celebrity place that it's not a normal place where people walk in. And I used that time to apply for a Fulbright grant to go to Singapore to research ways to use Big Talk to build empathy across cultures. And so I was getting paid, $15, $20 an hour. And I would apply while I was sitting there at the computer and write up this grant application, because that took hours and hours and hours to put together. And on my lunch breaks, I would go and call my research advisor. And I worked really hard. And then I also applied for this creative residency at 72 and Sunny. And I think I also did a 3-month internship at some marketing agency or whatever. And then I also modeled and babysat. So whenever I wasn't working on Big Talk, I was just kind of hustling small side jobs. And
you got the Fulbright award.
And I got the Fulbright, and I was crying, and my whole life changed after that. And since then, my life's been all Big Talk. But I got the Fulbright.
So let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about this really quickly. You know how when you are admitted to some sort of, I don't know, membership thing, or you win an award, you may not understand why they selected you initially, but then after you're in the club and you look around and you see all the other people who've also been admitted, then it starts to make sense. And then when someone comes to you and says, hey, how can I get this award or scholarship? You can kind of very clearly say, you need to make sure you include this, that, the other. What was it in hindsight that was the reason why you won that Fulbright scholarship, in your opinion?
A very niche, with Fulbright research, it's a very niche, nerdy passion. It's something you believe in full-heartedly. You're not just oh, I want to go live in another country for a year. You have this very specific project you want to complete, and you have this vision of how it will go down over the course of a year, regardless if it goes down like that, because most things don't once you actually are in the real world. But you are want to see this through to completion so badly, and you'll do whatever it takes. That's what you need to get a Fulbright.
You demonstrated that from your viral YouTube video and your TED Talk and the cards that you had made. And so that was all part of your package.
Yeah, I told them all about that. And I created a narrative around it. I mean, there was a narrative around it. So when I gave the TED Talk, a lot of people from Singapore specifically reached out to me asking for help with Big Talk. So I showed that narrative in my Fulbright application. And I talked about loneliness and social isolation and East-West relations and all sorts of researchy things like saving face culture and why it's harder for people in Eastern cultures to open up vulnerably and things like that. And so I crafted the whole narrative about why Big Talk, but why Singapore specifically. And for a Fulbright research project, you really need to have both, why the project and why in that country specifically.
So what does that mean to get a Fulbright scholarship? They pay you to be there, put you in an apartment. How does it work?
So they don't put you anywhere. You have to figure it out once you're there, but they do give you money. They gave me $29,000 to live in Singapore for 6 to 10 months and do my project. I wasn't tied to an institution, or I worked with a professor at the National University of Singapore But like with Fulbright, it's really like you're on your own. Like you move to a new country and you're by yourself and you got to figure it out. There was the US Embassy, and luckily the woman who was there who had read my application was advocating for Big Talk. I became close with her. And so I got to do some Big Talk events like for the embassy at like their dinners and things like that. And that really helped me establish myself when I moved there. And so like when I arrived in Singapore, I just met everyone I could. And my way of meeting people was by hosting a Big Talk event or something. And it really resonated with people. And like my very first event at the university, I met a girl who I ended up going to Bali with like a week or two later and learned to surf, which is now one of my main passions. And I met another girl that I went to Sri Lanka with. And then we ended up going to Kazakhstan a year later to do another research project. So it's like, you know, I just like followed the path, because when you're on your own in a foreign place, all you can do is just follow what feels right at the time. And it can lead to wild adventures.
You also had to switch up your strategy. You can't just go up to people in Singapore. Why was
No. It's not the norm there. It's a very hierarchical society. You can't like just walk up to strangers with a video camera. Maybe you can now, I don't know. But I had to host, everything in Singapore is very structured. So I had to host workshops and like focus groups. And that was how I spread Big Talk in Singapore. Like everything had to be like part of an existing institution or event or whatever. It couldn't just like stand on its own, which was a way that I got to be a part of so many different organizations. Like I did a Big Talk event for like the Muslim women of Singapore and for the Jewish women of Singapore. And I did one for students and for expats. And it like was very much just a kind of like a ticket or passport to meeting different communities within Singapore. And they also love titles there, like kind of shiny things. So like Fulbright Scholar sounds really good to them. So I was welcomed in most places I went to.
So that experience essentially validated Big Talk for you, right? Like, is that 100%. When you decided I'm going to make this my full-time thing? Or
yeah, that experience.
Was there a playbook? Like, okay, this other company has done this, I'm going to follow in their footsteps, or I got to get my machete out and start hacking away and blazing my own path?
A lot of hacking. It was while I was in Singapore that the cards officially got on Amazon. So that was when I was like, oh wait, I can make real money doing Big Talk. And then it was like when I was ending my tenure in Singapore that I started getting messages from people asking to pay me to do Big Talk events. I'm like, oh wait, this can be a real business. So it just kind of happened like that. Maybe it would have been nice if I had a playbook or someone to follow, but I didn't do that at the time.
Had you read any business books or any like nonprofit books or anything that kind of give you a little bit of guidance on where to go or how to show up when you're trying to get this thing done?
I would read like blogs or things on the internet, you know, when you're like really anxious about something and you do a Google search and read a couple articles that just validate how you're feeling, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there wasn't like a Bible book or anything that helped me. I have this thing where I like don't like to read too much or listen to too much. Like even actually before moving to Singapore, I didn't even look up what the country looked like. Like I just didn't even look up anything about it. I really like to just like judge something based off of my actual true lived experiences there and not have any preconceived notions. And that's kind of how I've done Big Talk, whether that's the right way to do it or not. Like I have so many people who are like, why don't you do this? Like you should do this. It's the obvious business thing to do. And I don't, for better or worse. I just kind of do what feels right at the time. I'm very like intuitive. So I don't run it like a business should be run, I guess, but it's worked so far. I live by the beach. Life's pretty good.
What about, I remember the first time I crossed paths with someone who had read my first book, but they didn't know that.
They didn't know it was you?
That I wrote the book. Yeah. So did you have that experience at all when you heard someone talking about Big Talk, or you saw someone with the cards and they didn't know that you were the one who innovated it?
That happens sometimes. Yeah. I don't think I'm like a household name enough that happens all the time. It's happened a few times. One day I will be like you.
So you started doing live events.
Mm-hmm.
What is a Big Talk live event like?
Yeah. So it's usually about an hour, and I'll give pretty much the same event to school children, to Army veterans, to entrepreneurs, to corporate, whatever. Like it doesn't matter. and it's about an hour long. And so the first 20 minutes, I give basically like my TED Talk, but better now because it's been a few years, where I talk more about how Big Talk has made impact. I talk about the epidemic of loneliness. I talk about ways to have a Big Talk conversation, kind of like a little tutorial. And I show the original video that started Big Talk. And then after that, that's about 20 minutes. I do 3 activities with people. And so the first activity is I pass out the Big Talk question cards, and I tell everyone to stand up and kind of like mix and mingle, like speed dating, speed networking type of thing with the cards, and have conversations based off of them or inspired by them. And that way people meet a lot of new people in a short amount of time and have a deeper conversation right away. And then for the second activity, I tell people to get into groups of 5 to 7. And so people get into these groups of 5 or 7, and I put up these like deeper Big Talk question cards, like digital ones, on a big screen. And I tell everyone to choose one of them. And each one really unveils like someone's life story or something deeper they're going through. And I tell them to go around in a circle and each choose one of those questions to answer. Like one of the questions is, when was the last time the way you saw the world change, and what inspired that? So questions like that. And people go around and tell their story. And then for the very last activity, I pass out blank note cards and really pretty paint pens and have everyone write their own Big Talk questions and a reflection on the back. And then we do a kind of open mic sharing session where people share their question, and then other people in the audience are able to answer that question. And we kind of popcorn back and forth. And then we close out with final reflections or ideas about how to bring Big Talk into your life moving forward. And so it's all about an hour to an hour and a half.
What are some of the takeaways that you have gleaned from this experience over the last 7 years?
Oh, so many. I mean, Big Talk is like my entire life now. It's the passport to everything else. And it has led to like surfing, and it's a way to start a conversation anywhere. But takeaways specifically is like that no one has to feel alone or disconnected or like isolated mentally or physically. Like you can just go outside and talk to someone and make a connection. You really can, even though there's like feels like this weird thick barrier to entry. It really just takes making the first step, because it's not like a norm in our society here, at least in the US, to like strike up a really friendly, meaningful conversation with someone for whatever reason. But it's like that in other cultures. I mean, I barely get any inquiries from South America. Most of the people who reach out to me are from the United States or Asia or Germany. So I think it's a cultural thing, because like we really have to fight to change that culture. And that's something I've realized. And also like if someone seems kind of off to you, like maybe they're actually just shy or insecure. So like Big Talk has really helped me not judge people, because once you ask someone a deep question, like crazy stories will emerge and that you never would have known. Like last week I went to go to the doctor and I like started talking to a technologist, and he's from Haiti. And it turns out he actually came here to be a technologist because his cousin was the prime minister of Haiti who was assassinated a year ago. And like, I just like, you never would know that unless you like start up a conversation that could lead to something like that. And like, he was saying that's why he decided to like avoid the political world entirely and do something peaceful, like be a technologist, like just things like that. Everyone has a story behind who they are and why they do what they do. And Big Talk's really taught me that.
Is there anything that people get wrong about Big Talk that you kind of find yourself defending?
That's a good question. There's things people get wrong, and that they're like, oh, that's weird that you want to go right to the Big Talk. Like, don't you value small talk? And so maybe I should change the tagline from skip the small talk to move past small talk. Because like, I understand that small talk has a place in society, and it's like kind of like a ticket into being able to talk with someone. So yeah, we'll turn it into move past the small talk. So I believe in small talk to a certain extent, but I don't think that should be the end all, because I don't think it's very meaningful or memorable. And I think what Big Talk really does is turn a conversation into something that's actually memorable and meaningful. And
what's a good pivot away from small talk to Big Talk so you don't make it too awkward?
So if someone like says, how's work going? And you're just like, good. Maybe a big talk question said to pivot would be like, oh, like what's the project you're most excited about working on right now? And then like, you know, you kind of like, there's levels from small talk to big talk. Having something like cards gives you the ability to skip the levels and to navigate those, because it's like, it puts the pressure on this instead of on you. And that offers the question right away. But like if you're doing it on your own, you do kind of have to navigate small talk to big talk to not come off seeming weird or whatever.
Yeah, because it could be weird if you go right to, hey, how's the weather? What do you want to do before you die?
Yeah.
You know?
And like, so that's what like people will get wrong about big talk, thinking like you have to do it like that. No, you don't have to. That was just like me proving a point through a video, you know? But you can say like, how's the weather? And someone's like, good, I love summer. And you're like, oh, like, what are your favorite summer memories? I don't know, you know, like you kind of, it takes effort, but at least it's such better conversations and it's totally worth it.
So what do people get wrong about you?
Not too much, because I'm pretty much an open book now at this point. I don't know.
Because you make it all look so easy, you know, like do people think it's easier than it actually has been to move this project forward? I know you and I had a conversation about how you were thinking about turning this into a business, but then it just didn't feel aligned with where you were inside. You had to make some transitions out of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe the thing that people get wrong, or that I've come to learn, is like, despite being a really open, big talky person, I don't trust everyone. And like, I'm careful. Like I'll be willing to be vulnerable and open and share my story, but I won't like trust everyone with like the future of big talk, or with, you know, like my time even. So maybe it's that I'm more, I wouldn't say guarded, because that sounds too strong, than I come off. Like I am a super friendly, open, bubbly, sunny person. I am, but I've had experiences where I've been burned before. So I'm careful. I'm careful and intentional. I think, yes, maybe I make it look easy, and it has become easy because I've done this for so long, but I've gone through so many road bumps to get to where big talk is now. Yeah.
And how are you thinking about success these days?
That's a very good question. I don't know, because I've had a lot of people be like, you should do this if you want to make $1 million. And I'm like, oh shoot, maybe I do need to make $1 million. So that's what means success is, and that would look really good. And so I think that sounds cool. And maybe like, I'm not good at like putting these like business objectives and plans down and be like, this is exactly how I will drive revenue, blah, blah, blah. It would be great to make more money through big talk so I could keep growing it. But I actually think success is like doing what I'm doing now and expanding it, and just keep growing it, like scaling it more professionally as well. But I'm also just having so much fun, like kind of following each moment. Like this past year, I've started hosting these live music big talk events, and that just kind of happened organically and on accident. And that's been successful to me, not because it like drives money or anything, but because I see how much meaning it has to people's lives. And when people are like, oh, I can't wait for the next one, or I've made so many good friends here, that's successful to me. So success to me is when big talk does what it's supposed to do, which is to help fight loneliness and foster community belonging and build empathy, or like drive curiosity.
So if someone listening to this wants to engage in more big talk, what do you recommend? Should they go on Amazon, get the cards? Should they just start asking questions? Like, what's the next step for them?
Yeah, I mean, anything. So they can go to my website, makebigtalk.com. And then if they want the cards, you can buy them through the website or through Amazon. And there's also an app of questions. So that's more accessible, especially for people who live far away. So it's the Big Talk Question Card app. Big Talk Question app or something like that. It's also on the website, makebigtalk.com. You can engage in big talk also by just going out and talking to your neighbors, trying out a question or here or there, reaching out to me directly if you have any specific questions or need help, hosting big talks in your own company, school, whatever. There's so many ways to do it. But yeah, if you need ideas, you can start by looking at the website, makebigtalk.com, or watching the video on YouTube.
And what if someone wants to bring you in to talk about big talk? Same thing, go to the website and there's a speaker form or something like this?
Yeah, or you can email me, Kalina at makebigtalk.com.
Perfect. Beautiful. Well, I just want to offer a couple of reflections. And I some of this may sound like a stretch, but I really do believe, I believe everything happens for a reason, right? So let's start there. And the fact that you were very much into drawing and singing and dancing as a child as your favorite activities. Like when I think about that and that level of expression, what those things tend to do for people, and it did it for you. If we're looking back at the Berlin Wall experiences, it inspires people. When somebody had an idea that day to write that question on that wall, probably in spray paint or whatever, and they didn't probably think more about it than any of us think about, anytime we draw something or sing something or write something or choreograph something. It's just for fun. We're just doing it because we feel like that's what should be done right now. And I feel like you're now doing that for, potentially millions, if not billions of people who are going to come across your questions directly or indirectly. And even more so the spirit behind the question, which is let's connect, let's get deeper with one another. Let's go beyond the small talk, because that's what the world is rapidly moving away from. And we need more luminaries like you who are putting in the work and showing up and creating different ways to help us connect more. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. Thank you very much for sticking with it as long as you have. And
thank you.
I want to thank you in advance for continuing on to stick with it. And I hope everybody gets a chance to get one of these card decks in their hands. I know you said you just came out with a newer card deck with more cards.
Yeah, this blue one's the newer one. It's bigger. Yeah. It has 150 questions.
The expansion pack with 150 questions. So that's cool. I didn't even know there was an app. So I can't wait to use the app when I'm, because I'm actually, what's funny about me is within my little friend circle, I'm known as the hypothetical question person. Like I'm always asking people questions like, what do you want to do before you die? Or even going further than that, what do you think happens when we die? And so I'm all over this. I'm like white on rice all over this, and I can't wait to get the expansion pack. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing your story so openly and transparently, and look forward to crossing paths with you again very soon.
Yeah, thank you for giving me space to share my story and also diving deeper than I feel like a lot of podcast interviewers do. You've asked me questions that no one's asked me before, so that's really cool to be able to share something new.
Thank you. I'm honored.
If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. Click this thumbnail right here, and I'll see you over there.